Okay, so now that we have performed the sensitivity analysis and we've looked at these these outputs at various ranges, now let's talk about a few more presentation elements that are typical in a DCF. And the first is the football field. The football field is actually a chart that you'll see in a lot of pitch books, a lot of presentations that try to show valuation ranges, whether it's the DCF or a comps analysis or an LBO model. A lot of the things that we're going to talk about in subsequent courses, the football field presents all that visually in a nice way. So what we're going to do here is we're going to look at the derived values from these ranges. So let's look at, for example, the value of Apple at the WACC that we modeled at the variety of different long-term growth rates. And you'll see at the WACC that we modeled of 12.9%, the range is 615 to 689. On the exit EBITDA multiple, if we wanted to see a range of values for Apple at the WACC that we assumed, we'd be looking at 717 to 814. If we looked at, for example, EBITDA, depending on their operating scenarios, we'd be looking at these different ranges. So let's create a football field that looks at some of those. In fact, we've defined what we want to see. We want to see the DCF value at an 8.3 to 10.3 times exit EBITDA range. Is just something we decided we're going to see. Or a DCF value at a 2 to 4% perpetuity range, assuming the WACC that we modeled. And notice we did all this dynamically. If you actually look at the formula here, we created a very dynamic row header that basically looks at this row header that says, hey, DCF value at this range of EBITDAs. We just hard-coded we hard-referenced the 8.25 on the low end of the multiple range and the 10.25 on the high end. And we're saying, okay, equals, in quotations, DCF value at end quote. So this is the text part. This is going to be the same no matter what. And then what we did is we referenced this D87, which is this cell, whatever's in the cell, which is always going to be the lowest end EBITDA multiple. And notice we had to wrap a text function around it. That's to format it as a multiple. You'll see what happens when I remove that text function in a second. And then we have to combine text with formulas. For those that went through our Excel crash course, you remember that we have to combine text with formulas with ampersand. So here we're combining text with a formula with an ampersand, and then the formula is over. So we have to combine again with an ampersand with more text, which is just that dash to get from 8.25 dash 10.25. Again, we wrap with an ampersand a formula to get to that 10.25%, and then ampersand, and then this is the final text, exit EBITDA range. So the first thing I want to show you is what happens if you actually remove the text and you just reference cells. It just gives you a result that's unformatted. You see 8.25 loses the formatting. So the only way to format within dynamic text is to go in and wrap a text function around it. So here's the value, and the format in quotations is the way you want to see it. So 1 decimal place with an X. This uses the same formatting syntax as when you hit Control-1 and you're trying to create custom formats in Excel. And see, and here you see that we were able to accomplish that. We do the exact same thing with the perpetuity approach. We just format this as a percentage when we make these references. So that's pretty straightforward. And then the last thing that we're going to look at is the valuation, both a high and a low valuation from the market share prices. So we've included in this in this file for you guys the 52-week high and low as of the writing of this course. So the high was $604.59 and the low is $393. So it's gone even further as of the recording of this video, but that's what it was as of May, whatever the date of this analysis is, May 19th, 2014. So that's kind of where we're at. And so the way we're going to build this football field is we got to get the raw data in here. So the low, the 52-week low, we can just reference from here. The high, we can reference from here. And the difference is simply the difference. We're going to need low, difference, and high to create a football field. You always need those ranges. So for the DCF value, we want the low, which comes from here. It's always going to be here because we want it at the actual whack, which we put in the middle. We can be more sophisticated about this because technically you could put in a different whack in here. But we're gonna just, to keep this simple, reference it directly from the data table. So this is going to be the low at an 8.25 range, at whatever this column is going to be. And then the high is going to be 814. At the 2 to 4% perpetuity, we want to take the low from here, and we want to take the high from here. You can copy this formula across, Alt-ESF for formula so you don't drag over the borders. And now you have all the raw data that you need. This is the low. These are the low valuations. Let's format them the same. These are the low valuations. These are the high valuations. Now we're going to build a football field. Now, a football field is simply a stacked bar chart. So if you go under here and you see columns, you're going to see something called a stacked column chart, I should say. Some football fields are actually presented as stacked bar charts as well, as sort of stacked the other way, but where it's sort of going from left to right as opposed to from the bottom up. But here we just want a stacked bar chart. And notice that since we had it highlighted, it already grabbed all the data that we wanted. So now it's just going to be an issue. So right now it doesn't look all that impressive, but it's going to very quickly, as you'll see, become a football field that looks just the way it would on the job. So first, let's do the following. We want to make the bottom. So we actually want to switch these axes, right? So we want to switch rows and columns. So that's the first thing. So Excel is taking a guess as to which direction I want it, and I want it where the valuation ranges are on the bottom. So I want to see that the DCF approach using the EBITDA multiple range is showing me a high of like 689 and, or let me see here, EBITDA of 814 and a low of 717. Notice that's these two right here. So this little sliver, these little slivers, these three represent the actual ranges. So these bottom ones are getting in the, and the top ones are getting in the way. So the trick with a football field is to just make those clear, to just remove any formatting away from those. So no fill here. That's basically the only trick. A lot of people struggle with getting the football field chart correctly. I like to remove these. This is typical presentation, doesn't show those. I also like to remove this. So now you have this. Now the next thing that we want to do is we want to actually create labels. So this is probably a pretty tricky part, because the label that I want to show, okay, hey, what's the minimum value here? It's actually coming from this bottom now invisible chart. So I want to go and add label to this, add data label. But the thing is, I want it to be a little higher. So there's a way that I can do that. I can sort of position it on the inside end or on the inside base or in the center, and I want it on the inside end. And I'm going to do the same thing here. I'm going to take that top part, I'm going to add data labels, but I'm going to then position it on the inside end, or sorry, on the inside base. Now I've got it doing what I want it to do. Now it's beginning to look like a floating bar chart. The last thing that I want to do, and this is a bit, there's some debate over whether you want to do this, but ultimately in presentations you almost always have to do this, and that is to make this look a little less, a little tighter, a little nicer. You have to sort of custom format the axis. What that means is I want this axis to really start not at 0, but something closer to like 350, so it doesn't start so low, and I want it to stop at like something right above the highest value. And you'll see that visually starts looking a little better. So I'm going to right click on this, and I'm going to click on Format Axis. I'm going to select under Axis Options a fixed minimum of 350, something right below the market high and low. So that's actually too low, because you see it's sort of bleeding into the x-axis. So let me change that to maybe something like 300. Unfortunately, when these numbers change down the road, that's the downside of this. that you could have to go back here and sort of revisit this. Let's actually do something like 200 because I think even 300 bleeds. And for a maximum, let's do something like 1,000. So this is just purely for visual presentation purposes. Now this looks a little bit tighter, looks a little bit better. And of course, the last thing that I want to do is I want to add a title to this. I could do that here. Or actually the easiest thing at this point is to just go into chart title, centered above chart. And you could sort of title this however you want. Then you could play around with the formatting, whatever your firm's conventions are. But this is the essence of a football field. One thing to keep in mind when you're building football fields on the job, then in the next course, we're going to derive a valuation range using a comps modeling approach or an LBO model approach in the following course. All of these end up making their way into a football field to create this sort of mosaic of, hey, what are the potential values for this company? Quite often you'll see a line being sort of just being layered on top of this. It says, okay, this is a reasonable value based on all these approaches. So if I looked at all these approaches, I might draw a line here. This is fairly unscientific in the investment banking world. Draw a line sort of randomly in the middle of these approaches to say that this is the fair value that we believe makes sense. Okay, in the next video, we're going to just wrap up this section here by adding what the current LTM EBITDA multiple is based on what the market is giving us.